There we go. We are doing reincarnation this evening. What a lovely topic. David. Good evening, family. This should be so interesting. I love each one of you. David. David is the man. Yeah, interesting is a fun word. It's a fun way to put it. It will be interesting. That is for sure. It will be interesting if my head doesn't explode before this is over. Tampa. Hey, hey. I'll open Discord. There's that. There's that. Oh, the S-Mill. How lovely. How lovely. After no Sunday, which is weird. A ghost. Fair warning. I have a splitting headache, and I've had it for like a full day. So, be gracious and lenient with me. But we'll do the best we can here. Well, we wait for stragglers. If you're watching this later for whatever reason, because this is going to be highly heretical this evening, we have another YouTube channel where we do all these live Bible study fun things at. It's at Live Bible Study Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday for the most part. Saturday, whenever it works out. Right now, between the Book of Giants on Thursday, Genesis on Sunday, and the Gospel of Truth just ended. So I think we decided the Book of Thomas this coming Saturday, which is really good. So if you've not read the Book of Thomas and you're into weird stuff like this, highly recommend you either read it yourself or come on Saturday. We will probably read the whole thing on Saturday, unless it turns into a discussion. Everything else is on the channel you're on right now. We've talked about some interesting stuff recently, so there's good stuff there. Also, Discord, there's a link pinned to the top of the live chat. There is a link. Oh, girl, it's gonna be a rough night. In the description of the video. And Discord's great. It speaks for itself. So to spend 5 minutes in there, and then you'll probably be in there for good. Do you want some tea? Yeah, actually, that would be fantastic. You're the best. Make sure it's not sleepy time tea. Yes. Good advice, because we do have that. That's good stuff. There's some teas that are just real good. Can you bring it to Minnesota for me? Isn't Minnesota getting hit really hard by this storm? I feel like. Whatever, cat. Whatever, don't care. Probably something with caffeine, because it might help. The old head there. Everyone's getting hit with snow. I just got tried to be let know that I can't work tomorrow and that I have to come in on a Saturday. And I'm going to instead go work tomorrow because I have no interest in working on a Saturday. So if I die tomorrow, it's been real. Love y'all. I'm going to sabotage this whole stream. Ghost, Mama's tired. It's nighttime. It's just frigid? I thought Minnesota was getting slammed. But maybe I'm thinking of somewhere else. Jasmine tea. I don't think we have jasmine tea, actually. That's one we don't have. Earl Grey double bergamot. This is getting tea snobby. We just buy tea in bulk from some website, and it's very good. And I definitely shouldn't put that one on YouTube, Ghost. But that'd be great. I'd probably get a very good sleep. So I'm down for this. The flowers, green tea kombucha. Yes, that's good stuff. That's the good stuff. Okay, so because we've done this before, and I think twice, I found one at least because Layman watched it and then like left a comment or something. So I watched that again, but I'm almost sure we did it twice. Honestly, I didn't look because I didn't have enough time, but I know for a fact we didn't take this angle with either of those other two. So as usual, I kind of have a set 20-ish slides. I try to keep it within Christianity because I feel like the last couple times, boo too, I feel like the last couple times we did this, it was pretty obscure. We did a lot of like concept and theory and personal opinions, which is good and I'm down for. So as they come up, I definitely want to hear them or read them. But at least with what I have, I try to keep it within like the early Christian perspective. Because I think one, a lot of people don't think about the fact that early Christians, many of them, like they believed in reincarnation. They might not have used the word, but the concept was very similar. And in some cases, it was the same. And ironically, it takes us to a topic we've talked about a lot recently, which has to do with the Gnostics. And so there's some of that in there, as well as some Christian esoteric stuff, all that. But I try to keep it different than what we've done before. So reincarnation, what I call a heretical deep dive. Do any Christians believe in reincarnation? How heretical can we get? And the answer is very, very heretical. The Gnostics. So early Christian Gnosticism, which we know by now is the what is called the mystical branch of Christianity. At least it was what it was kind of deemed when they were demonizing all of them. It contained some pretty decent things that would resemble reincarnation, where the soul undergoes multiple lifetimes seeking spiritual enlightenment. I just hear a cat yelling at dogs in the background. So very similar stuff. They didn't use the word, as far as I know, but similar stuff. I'm going to read this because the text was small. So, and I tried to fit as much on one page as humanly possible. But Gnostics, this is kind of a general overview of which sects kind of fit in to this topic. So reincarnation fit into their worldview as a process by which the soul, which was trapped in the cycle of birth and death, because if you remember, Gnostics believe that those with spiritual awareness are trapped here. The cosmic battle happened, the wisdom reaching for monad and the pleroma. And thus we have all these trapped living beings in human bodies, which they believe are negative things. So trapped in the cycle of birth and death, gradually gain the knowledge, gnosis, needed to escape the material world, and thus return to the pleroma. The story of Sophia, if you remember. If you don't have any idea what I'm talking about, and probably watching this later because everybody here definitely does, then go watch the video we did a couple weeks ago on this YouTube channel. A few weeks back, it says, "What is Gnosticism?" Go watch that and then come back. It will clarify a lot. A few of these Gnostic groups are ones that I'm not super familiar with. Valentinian, we've talked about a bit. The Manichaeans, we've talked about a bit. So, as usual, if I pronounce something wrong, you're going to have to get over it. Different Gnostic perspectives on reincarnation. So, the Valentinian Gnostics in the 2nd century. The Valentinians focused more on spiritual enlightenment in general than on a more narrowed idea of reincarnation. But some believe that souls could return to physical life if they failed to gain the knowledge, the gnosis, in one lifetime. So it's more of a loose fit, but it certainly fits. I feel like when you think of reincarnation, at least when I do without doing any mental clarity exercise for myself, you immediately think of Hindu or one of the more mainstream classic ideals of reincarnation, where you're born into something else, maybe you're an animal, whatever. It's not technically what it is. Reincarnation is a pretty broad term that you could apply to many different things. So in a loose sense, it certainly fits with what a lot of the Valentinian Gnostics believed. Basilides, a group I'm not super familiar with, the Gnostic teacher of the group proposed a form of reincarnation as a process of purification. which is interesting, where souls would return to Earth based on past actions, which is similar to karma, I learned, looking into it a bit. So, interesting. They were going on doing their thing about the same time as the Valentinian Gnostics. The Manichaeans were a little bit later, the 3rd century-ish, which is an offshoot of the Zoroastrian and Buddhist ideals. So you find a lot of that in there. I don't know if Mikkel's here, but I think Mikkel knows a bit about the Manichaeans. But they believed in the transmigration of souls. They saw reincarnation as a way for souls to shed their attachment to darkness and thus return to the realm of light, which is a different way to say what someone like the Valentinian Gnostics believe, which is where you're trying to shed the human flesh, or as the Manichaeans say, the darkness, and return to the pleroma, and like the Manichaeans would say, return to the realm of light. So different, it's semantically different, but the concept underlying is relatively the same. The Pistis Sophia, so Gnostic text from the 3rd, 4th century-ish. The text describes how souls who fail to achieve enlightenment must reincarnate multiple times until they are spiritually prepared to ascend to the divine. It's the same. It's the same as the Valentinian. So you can see, just like with everything in Christianity today, a lot of, and some of these exist today, but in mainstream Christianity, a lot of the concepts, something like baptism, where certain groups take it really serious. They have certain terms that they use for it and how they integrate it into doctrine. And then other groups have the concept. They might explain it different and might have less significance. And then they'll incorporate it into their doctrine. It was no different with something like reincarnation with some of the early Christian groups that were then demonized. The fate of the soul, which would apply to, from what I understand, all of these groups. In many Gnostic traditions, reincarnation was seen as a trap rather than a natural process. Other religions, and probably the classic, what is reincarnation? What comes to your head? A lot of those processes are considered or described to be natural processes. This is just how it goes. It's a natural thing. This wouldn't have been the case for the early Christians, for the Gnostics and the like. It would be seen as unnatural, because why were they here to begin with? The whole story around Sophia is that they got trapped here. So that wouldn't be natural. It was something that happened. The material world was a place of suffering and illusion, and the ultimate goal was to break free from the cycle of rebirth by attaining knowledge or gnosis, spiritual awakening, and recognition of one's divine origin. So it's an interesting dichotomy, I guess you could say. Ghost said, wouldn't purgatory be considered a dollar store reincarnation? Would it though? That's an interesting question. Would it though, or would it be different? Because purgatory, you're kind of moving. I guess it depends on what you believe about purgatory. That's a good question though. The immediate thing that like pops into my head is that it's different, isn't it? Don't most people who believe in the purgatory concept, like, isn't it a waiting ground or like the final boss before either heaven or hell? That's what I remember from Catholic school, at least, is that it was like a waiting area where you were tested again, and if you passed, you went to heaven, and if you failed, you went to hell.
It was just a random idea. I don't know.
I think it's an interesting question. I guess it'd be something I'd be curious to see, like, what, if there are any sects of Christianity where that would fit, because I bet it would with some of them. I bet it would. I don't know. Purgatory is something I need to definitely brush up on and probably learn more, because I have a very narrow, like, Catholic understanding of purgatory.
Me too. I don't really know much about it other than just, the stuff I've heard
Maybe we
here
do
and
that
there.
then. I'll put that on the list, because that would be fun. Yeah.
Because isn't reincarnation to work on stuff? Like you didn't do something, so you have to come back to do it, I guess, or get better at something.
I think in most cases, yeah. Even in the Gnostic one here, like that's it. I think that is a pretty universal underlying reality of the concept. At least all the concepts that I'm aware of. I think that would be fair to say, yeah. So I think
If
that
someone knows where the idea of purgatory came from, maybe they can drop it in the chat
I
because I
would,
don't know.
yeah, that'd be great. If anybody does, please do. And in the meantime, I'm gonna add purgatory here because that'd be something I would like to do. It's something that deserves some attention for sure. It's an interesting way to say that, though. Yeah, I want to come back to that. Sorry, y'all. They're doing clean activity. Oh my God, cat. They're technically a part of the church, referencing the asshole animals. Excuse my language. See, here we go. And now purgatory is the new reincarnation. So we'll do purgatory. Maybe next week. We'll just we'll run right into it, no poll. Because now I'm on the purgatory bend. Staying behind stuff to work on. S. Mill said, I know you can pray for those in purgatory to redeem them. Where does that come from? So obviously you have a specific view of what purgatory is, or else you're pulling that from somewhere. So where are you pulling that from? Is this a Catholic thing? Because that would align from what I know with the Catholicism, like their perspective, because they do pray for those in purgatory. And they, from what I understand, they believe that does something, which to me doesn't make a lot of sense with the whole concept of divine
I wonder
judgment.
if they think that. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Do they think that purgatory is a part of like Sheol?
See, that's what I think is unclear. I've never found clarity on that. I think some would say yes, and I think some would say no, and I think the majority would not be able to answer the question from my experience. And
because I mean, just from the limited knowledge I have on it, this world seems like purgatory. Because aren't we being sanctified here?
well, that's the idea, right? That's the part I don't get. Is if we're doing it here, then we're doing it in purgatory. It seems odd, especially when you try to make that process make sense with what Scripture says about sanctification and salvation and things like that. And then I think it becomes even more muddy when you add in this concept of like, okay, well, when somebody dies, they go to purgatory, but then the prayers of the people on earth still at level 1 have some realistic implication in terms of sanctifying somebody. I think it becomes theologically very convoluted. But I think it's a great topic. And now I'm pretty sure that we're just going to strong arm it into next week, because I think that would be interesting. Kat said purgatory came from Taylor Swift trying to make bank, babe. Duh. Satan was like, yes, good idea. Did the Chiefs lose? I don't like football. Did they lose last night? Is Taylor Swift crying on the internet? Yeah. I haven't seen that, but I would like to. Layman said, but we don't know what purgatory would look like. This world matches what we should expect if we ought to be growing in holiness. Huh. S. Mill gave a source. So good old Maccabees, which are great texts if you haven't read them, because they're not in your canon. There is this sentence, he says, therefore Judas Maccabeus made atonement for the dead so that they might be delivered from their sin. So, yeah, I mean, like I said, so it's Catholic, is what I'm assuming, especially when you pull the Maccabees out, which I have no problem with whatsoever. I think outside of the canon, you can certainly find things, I think, that would back that, for sure, and other things. So then it's a matter of making it make sense. And then it's a matter of making it make sense across a broad library of literature. And I think it becomes more difficult and more difficult. And in some ways, easier and easier. Because all these texts, like, you can justify virtually anything. But you can also invalidate virtually anything. And that's why it becomes an impossible task, at least to some degree. Purgatory is where they play Taylor Swift's music 24/7. Okay, now it makes even more sense. Got it. S. Mill gave 1 Corinthians 3:13-15 because it will be revealed by fire, and the fire will test what sort of work each one has done. It's a bit more vague, though, right? Sorry, that one you just read was part 3 of my overall comment on purgatory character limits. Okay. Let me roll back to that. And then I'm pulling us off purgatory, because I'd like to make this next Tuesday. So his first comment was, there is no clear definition of the nature of purgatory, like what it is, but there are two models. One says it's about paying off your sins, called sanctification. The other is about growing in holiness to grow closer to God, which is sanctification. So then, no, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. I'm going to keep it. I'm going to make a note because I want to talk about that, but not tonight. So I'm going to save it. Maybe purgatory doesn't relate too well to reincarnation, but there just seems to be something to it that is connected. I'll look more into it. Yeah, I think there has to, or not there has to be. I think there is, at least to some degree. It seems to be. And if we run through all this and have time, then we can finish on that, and I'll just take notes, and then we'll roll it into next week. So breaking down a little bit more of this, the Valentinian view. Who was he first? Because we brushed across the character a number of times over the past month or so. He was what arguably one of the most prominent Gnostic teachers, at least that we're aware of, in the 2nd century, who nearly became a bishop in the early Christian church before his teachings were deemed heretical. And this is really interesting because he gained prominence. It was massive, common. It would not be unusual. There are writings from early church fathers saying, be careful what churches you go into, because you may stumble into a Gnostic church. And some of the insinuation is that these churches were so normal and accepted that a non-Gnostic could wander into a Gnostic church and not really realize what was happening. And yet, they became so wildly demonized. But they were accepted so much that some of the leaders almost made it into, common ranks. So reincarnation in Valentinianism specifically, it was not considered a core teaching. Some of them, however, believed in a form of spiritual rebirth across multiple timelines. So it's that like trying again to find gnosis so that you can be released from the trap of the physical body in the physical world. If a soul failed to attain the divine knowledge, the gnosis, in one life, it might be given another chance to achieve enlightenment. However, the ultimate goal was to escape material existence entirely, because this was a trap. And then their idea of the soul journey was that the soul had to awaken to its divine nature before being freed from the cycle of rebirth. So the cycle of reincarnation. Those who remained ignorant, and then so the psychics were one that get called out. The helix, or the material-focused souls, would continue to reincarnate, while the enlightened would ascend to the pleroma. We also brush on this when we talked about the Gnostic view, is that they kind of had this general idea that there were 3 types of people. There were people who today we'd call them NPCs. They're non-player characters. They're people who aren't really, they're there, but they're barely there. And you can't have a deep spiritual conversation with them, would be the easiest way to say it. It's obviously more complicated than that. But they're basically just filler, which is rude, I suppose. But I feel like everybody kind of knows somebody who might be filler. And then the second type of person is somebody who has the capacity for spiritual awareness, but it seems to be limited. Like there is a threshold that they just can't cross. And then you have people who, and I'll be very biased when I say this, a lot of like, all of you guys, in my opinion, are like the next level, where everybody here is able to have a highly spiritual conversation, to the point of pushing each other to go deeper on things that a lot of people wouldn't even be able to brush the surface on. That was kind of their view of the spiritually enlightened, or capable of spiritual enlightenment. That's kind of what they're talking about there. The next group, this is one of the ones I'm not super familiar with. I'm still not. There doesn't seem to be a lot that is cohesive upon first glance. So take this all with a grain of salt. But what I was able to put together, the Basilides. This was a teacher in Alexandria, so hub of early Christianity, who developed what they consider to be a complex cosmology that was influenced by Greek philosophy, Christianity, as well as Eastern ideas, which kind of makes sense with the rest of this. As far as reincarnation and purification, they believed in transmigration of souls, which was brushed on in the last slide, meaning that human souls could be reborn based on their past actions. similar to the concept of karma in Hinduism and Buddhism. Oddly similar, like very similar. And then when you look into him, the leader of this group of Gnostics, it seems he pulled a lot from Eastern ideas, which to some degree makes sense. They had an emphasis on the connection to justice. So he saw reincarnation as a way for souls to atone for sins committed in past lives. Specifically, this was a specific thing. In the Valentinian view, this was a more broad thing. For them, it's specific. Reincarnation was a way for souls to atone for sins. If someone suffered in this life, it was often because of wrongdoing in a previous life. That part is very Eastern. That, in my opinion, from what I understand and from what I know, it's a very Eastern view of reincarnation. That you will become reincarnated into something as a punishment. You know, I don't want to come back as an insect, because that would be seen as a punishment. Stuff like that. I feel like it's kind of the trope of reincarnation. Liberation through knowledge. Like other Gnostic sects, this gentleman taught that the material world was a prison. Through spiritual enlightenment and inner transformation, souls could escape the cycle of rebirth and return to the divine realm. Again, they here have a more broad understanding of the more narrow Valentinian and other Gnostic view of the pleroma and the physical body issue, I guess you could say. Real quick, I don't want to leave anyone hanging. That's a great way to say that. They're all caught up in the branches, unaware of the roots, not caring or afraid. I think that's a great way to say that. I would also add, though, and I'm sorry if I missed something earlier, but I would say there are also people who are just not capable. So I don't think it's always not caring or are afraid. I think that describes people who are in the middle, the people who are capable of spiritual enlightenment to some degree, but there is a threshold. Maybe there are people in that category who the threshold's not actually there and they just don't care, or they're afraid, and so they can't cross the threshold. But I think there are also people like the first group of people, I believe they're just not capable of it. I feel like everybody's met somebody where you know they're just literally not capable of having that kind of conversation or having that depth of thought. I've certainly met people like that. Like a large number of people, I feel like, who just no matter what, they would never be able to get there. And it's not a dig at them. I just, everybody's different. And I feel like I see that category of people a lot. But there's nothing to be afraid of. God is good. Good way to wrap that up. S. Mill said, Gospel of John 9:2. They asked Jesus, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? What did he sin if he was born blind? Oh, when did he sin if he was born blind? Well, okay, we can go into that. So I'm going to read it again. The verse was John 9:2. It's when he was being questioned. And it said, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? In my opinion, exegetically, I feel like this and many other verses, the implication is on the parents. This man or his parents, that he was born blind. Because there was this idea in the early ancient world and then through into the Greco-Roman world, it was still relatively popular, where children could be punished, generational sin, generational curses. Like this idea that children could suffer the consequences of something their parents did. I believe exegetically that's what that verse is about. And there are many others. There are a lot of examples in the Old Testament like that. And I believe there are several others in the New Testament too. If you think I'm wrong, though, I'm happy to hear your side of it. Ghost said patterns certainly reappear. Souls are identities. So in that sense, I agree with that kind of reincarnation. The question lies with the memory. Souls are identities. So in that sense, I agree with that kind of reincarnation. The last one we read? Here. Couldn't you broadly apply that to really any of them, though? Like the ideas of reincarnation?
Yeah, I mean, that's why I brought up memory, because patterns always repeat and identities are patterns, but can patterns have, like, what is memory? I don't know what memory is, so it's hard to draw the line.
Yeah, it's a good question, actually. The question lies with memory.
Because
really
history repeats itself because personalities constantly repeat, but there would have to be like a central mind that is doing the remembering. Otherwise, I don't know. It makes my brain hurt.
Do you think that Oh, go ahead.
What if we have the wrong understanding of what memory is, and it's not what we think it is, but it's the access that our brain gets to our mind, or the Akashic record, or the cloud, or whatever you want to call it, like the information that's already there, like it's all already there, just the access we have to it is what we look at as memory? That's what
I was just gonna say. Is that I think there's some truth to that, and I think like the easiest way for me to visualize that would be to think about it in very simple terms of like you have a worldly memory from the point of your birth, the things you experience with your senses. You have these memory ties to them, but I feel like it seems that people throughout history have also had memory of things that don't quite connect here and rather somewhere else. And maybe you call that the cloud or call that God or whatever, but something else. And then maybe they get perhaps that gets convoluted by this memory, by your life memory, your this reality memory. That's interesting. Mikkel. Hey, Mikkel. It is great to have Layman here. Yes, it's already been fantastic. And I hope he's here next week, because next week we're going to do purgatory. And I had to save 4 of his comments already to move them to next week. What gives us a sense of time? Esmil said, people who can't retain memories have no sense of time. Memory is what gives us a sense of time. Right, but is that all it does? I think that's a function of it, but I don't know if that's all that it does, right? So I think that would be one underlying function of what memory provides or what it does, but I think on a greater scale, memory is something else, even like within the scope of your puny, tiny, insignificant little life. But then it also seems to be attached in some way to something that is perhaps objective, perhaps unchanging, something outside of the minuscule reality that we're living. Maybe, I don't know. The Manichaeism, 3rd century, so moving a little bit later. And I believe this is what Mikkel knows about, so Mikkel can call me a liar if I got any of this wrong. Mani, from 216 to 276 AD, was a Persian prophet who founded Manichaeism, a religion combining elements of Christianity, Zoroastrianism, and Buddhism, which is not dissimilar from some of the other Gnostic groups. And it seems they just have emphasis on this more than that and that more than this, depending on which group you're in. The dualistic cosmology, just like many of the others, Mani taught that the universe was divided between light, which is good, and darkness, which is evil, which is, in a general sense, the same as the rest of the Gnostics. Human souls were originally part of the light, but became trapped in the material world, in alignment with all the other Gnostics. As far as reincarnation goes, souls reincarnate multiple times, moving through different bodies, even animals, based on their actions. So what they do. The purpose of these rebirths is to purify the soul and eventually escape the physical world. So far, total alignment with general Gnostic beliefs. This belief was more structured than earlier Gnostic groups and closely resembled Buddhist karma and samsara, which is the cycle of rebirth. How they believed you broke free was through one thing only. And it was more lifestyle, interestingly enough, from my understanding, again, and Mikkel can correct me because I've not spent incredible or ridiculous time on Manichaeism. But from what I gather, a lot of it is lifestyle related, like not eating meat is one of the things. So in contrast to especially modern Christianity, which has to, I would never call you a liar, Joe. I hope you would if I lied. Or I hope you would tell me you're dead ass wrong if I get something wrong. From what I understand, it was very much lifestyle. So, like, not being a vegetarian was a thing from everything I see. And this is definitely something I need to go deeper in. So please be graceful with me. But it seems as though what you do in a very worldly sense is of importance, which to me, and in a way, makes sense. When you clue in Zoroastrianism and you clue in Buddhism as some of the big influences, it kind of makes sense. They also had a very strict directive towards Mani's teachings specifically, whereas some of the other Gnostic groups within the context of tonight that had reincarnation concepts, it was never really about the prophet. It was more about these generalized concepts of how things worked. It was much less isolated to an individual. Not such the case from what I've gathered with Manichaeism. There is an emphasis on the individual. There is an emphasis seemingly on worldly actions, things like being vegetarian, stuff like that. So there are a lot of similarities and then some pretty stark differences. Pistis Sophia was even later, so moving to the end of the 3rd century into the 4th century. This is a Gnostic text, probably written in Egypt, that describes Jesus's teaching of his disciples and about the journey of the soul after death, which I find interesting because we don't really get that in Christianity. We kind of just get cut off. You have the Gospels, you have Paul interacting with church, you have some apocalyptic work, and then you have to leave the Bible to move into anything else. You move into some of the apocryphal texts, you get a bit of it, the journey of the soul after death, but even then it's lacking. Moving into some of the Gnostic stuff, which unfortunately we don't, for the most part, have really anything. We just have commentaries about them because they were all destroyed. It seems that they had relatively well-developed ideas of what that was like. What was the journey of the soul after you die? Which would be great to have. And it's very unfortunate that destruction of these documents was a big thing. The role of reincarnation for the group that surrounded this Pistis Sophia text, the text itself states that sinful souls must reincarnate multiple times until they are purified. So far on par with the other Gnostic beliefs. Souls that fail to gain enlightenment are reborn into worse conditions or even into animals. Specifically, some of the others kind of insinuate it. Some of them, no. Here we get a specific that you could, if you were really bad, reincarnate into an animal. Those who attain gnosis or knowledge can bypass reincarnation and ascend to higher spiritual realms. So you get to leave the game and move on to something entirely different. There is a hierarchy structure to the afterlife. So in the text, it describes that there are different levels of heaven and hell, which is not dissimilar to other groups. Obviously, everybody's kind of heard of this before, where souls are judged based on their actions in alignment with the rest of the Gnostic beliefs. The ultimate goal is to reach the kingdom of light and escape the material world, which is also in alignment with everything else that the Gnostics believe. Ghost said it's... Oh, did I miss something before I read that, though? Oh, hold on. Layman said, Esmil, dude, I actually think memory is history and prediction is future. Like, these don't have the same ontological status as the present, which is where memory and prediction reside. I feel like I missed something on that, too, though. Do you think that's all it is, though, Layman? Do you think memory is just history, or do you think there are other aspects to it? I think it's fair to say that, but I wonder if that's all that it is. Esmil said, according to the Gospel of Matthew 11:14 and 17:10-13, Jesus believed that Elijah had come, namely in the person of John the Baptist. Don't even get me started, bro, on John the Baptist. I think that's the next deep dive that I'm doing. I want to do a video on. John the Baptist was specifically including that verse because I have some I have some things and issues with it. So I'll leave it for now. But I'm glad you pointed it out. Layman said the present is where rationality happens, and rationality equals memory plus prediction. That's an interesting way to say that. I mean, it's true, right? It's true. But is it complete? I think it's fair to say, though. But is it complete? That's what I wonder. David said, speaking of memory, let's subscribe and like we forget. Yeah, do YouTube stuff, y'all, please. David, I love you. You're the greatest. Okay, this is what I missed. So Tampa said something, and I missed that. Shoot, and I don't want to spend too much time. Tampa said, I only say that because the better I get at playing the game, the better my memory keeps getting. And then Ghost responded to that somewhere. Boom. Honestly, it's hard for me to make sense of reincarnation on an individual level, but on a central mind level, it makes more sense. I think you're right. The game analogy. Every time we start a new character, it's reincarnation, but we play better after every restart if we paid attention in the prior run. I think y'all are closet Gnostics, is what it sounds like to me. Tampa replied, it fits so well for me. It's kind of creepy, just not in a scary way, if that makes sense. I think that makes sense. Layman said it depends on what we identify with. Like, what are we? Exactly. I think that is the question. And then what are you being reincarnated as? Reproduction is an autocorrect mistake. Retrodiction is a big word for Apple. Apple struggles with many words, in fact. Closet Gnostic hype. I think to a degree, man, a few of y'all out there seem to be. And for what purpose? Yes, go ahead.
I fit with a lot of the Gnostic beliefs as if it's on a Christian perspective, like if it's towards the Bible and Jesus, like the way it fits in. Like you're talking about how they got, heretics.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But they seemed absolutely normal, and even the Christians didn't realize that they were, because they may have been doing it right. Because I thought they sounded crazy at first until I kept learning things, and then I was like, oh gosh, I'm one of the crazy people now.
I think what's most damning about it to me is just when you really, really spend the time down the rabbit hole and you realize how hard the early church fathers, who very clearly had what's the right word? They had an intention. How bad they wanted to disgrace what was previously no problem at all. Gnostic, totally normal. Many different groups with varying beliefs, but they were all believed centrally the same thing. Including seemingly, without him being the Gnostic, Marcion, who probably put together the first actual Bible. All these people were to varying non-essential degrees, non-essential degrees different, essential doctrine-ish the same, and then just gets massively demonized by this group of Christians who all have one intention and focus. So much so that they burn and destroy basically the entire existence of the group of people. I just find it so damning. If you have to completely destroy everything, it just goes like, what are you hiding? You're hiding something. You didn't destroy other pagan, but like we have all kinds of pagan stuff, using that very broadly. No problem. But for some reason, the Gnostics just like, we have to destroy them from history. We have to completely wipe them out.
I started leaning that way and started looking into it, even though everybody was like, no, that's a pagan or whatever. Like it was of the devil, pretty much. That was Satan, is what the church was telling me.
Oh, for sure.
When I went and looked into it, it was like, wait a minute, no, they're being demonized is what's going on. And you know who else was demonized and destroyed? We've seen this before. That's what they did to Jesus too, right?
Right. I just think there's such a good case for it. I think it's complex because actually S-Mill just said something that is why it's complex. He said, what gets crazy for me are the numbers of Gnostic archons and aeons are like the number of Hindu deities by the 4th century, which is true. Like, obviously, some of the groups had hundreds. Some of the groups had a handful. And some of the groups, we don't have any idea because we don't know anything about them at all because it's been completely taken from us. But it's just like anything else, where it seems to have started somewhere, and then people pushed and pulled it along the way and added things and pulled things and curated it and whatever. And I think for the most part, all of that is irrelevant. Just like in Christianity today, I think it's irrelevant. These denominations are irrelevant. If you believe in the central things that make you a by definition Christian, the rest is it's wish and wash. You know, it's the ebbing and flowing of things that are non-essential. I don't see why the Gnostics would be any different, just like anything else. If the central themes are the same, which they are, from what we have, at least, and from what I know, they are. All the Gnostics believed all the same things that mattered. And then outside of that, yeah, there's all this wild ebbing and flowing of different things.
My brand of Gnosticism is more like we follow along with what Jesus taught, and then we just keep seeking gnosis. Pretty much, we're looking for more knowledge, and
yeah,
from my experience, it keeps uncovering.
Oh yeah, and just wait when we'll go into Thomas on Saturday, starting this week, and then after that, I want to do Judas, and then I want to kind of curate our Saturdays through some of the extra canonical texts that really shed light on like this idea that Jesus was teaching in secret. And I think as we do it, I want to pull up the gospel, the canonical gospels, as we read them and show how dramatically connected they are. And even Paul talks about the secret things. It's just stuff that we wash over.
On that before or not, but I don't think it was so much secret. It was just you've got to reach a certain point to be able to understand it, or it wouldn't even be any good to you. It'd probably be harmful to you if you didn't have a certain level of knowledge that
for sure
you needed to understand it. For
sure, but like, so consider like some of the gospel language. I guess I totally agree, but some of the gospel language is like it some of it is knowledge based. It seems like the gnosis concept. And then some of it is like, well, I guess either way, you're right. Actually, the more I'm thinking about it, it's just a semantic thing. Yeah, I think it all boils down to just that. The secret knowledge is maybe kept secret because certain people couldn't grasp the concept, which lends, I think, validity to what you're saying. I think that's fair. Yeah. Ghost said it's hard not to if you're going to try to incorporate metaphysicals into theology. Mikkel, what did Mikkel say? Closet Gnostics. And then Mikkel said, seems we all have some Gnostic patterns. Ghost, I think it's impossible not to, if you're being honest. I think how far it goes is maybe there's a question. But I think it's hard to be a deep thinker and not agree with some of what the Gnostics seem to be teaching. I think you have to close your eyes and walk forward to disagree with everything. Layman said, like, goodness isn't soft. Goodness is just, righteous, and that's tough, like a ram. Goodness is an active force, like light in the darkness, like a ram. Okay. All right. If anything important pops up, somebody interrupt me. Now into more fun stuff, which I like how this has gone so far because it is flowing very well. So now Origen of Alexandria. This is an individual I have spent a lot of time on. So his range of time is 185 to 253 AD. This is one of the most influential as well as controversial early Christian theologians. The funniest thing about this guy is that Christians today, Christian theologians, Christian scholars, will use Origen to validate things that they want to validate from early Christianity. And they will ignore the fact that Origen himself had some interesting beliefs. He was a scholar, a biblical exegete, and a philosopher who sought to reconcile Christian doctrine with many Greek philosophical ideas. His ideas were highly influential in shaping early Christianity and early Christian thought. But some of his teachings, at some point, how could this ever happen? He began to be called a heretic and was demonized after being arguably one of the most important sources, in my opinion, from that period of time. Wildly important. We base so much of what we know on a lot of that period of time off of people like Tertullian and Origen. These people are very important, and he was very important, and he was highly regarded until he was then labeled as a heretic. Origen views on pre-existence and the soul. So one of his central beliefs was that the soul existed before birth and had a life before entering the physical world. Well, it kind of sounds like some of what the Gnostics teach. This is known as the pre-existence of souls, which he discusses in his work De Principiis, on first principles, which this is available. You can find this and you can read it. Souls existed before birth in a spiritual realm created by God. They fell from their original state due to sin or lack of devotion to God. Their placement in physical bodies was seen as a form of divine correction or purification. The purpose of life was to return to God through spiritual purification. So not in exact alignment to a lot of what the general Gnostic views of some of those things are, but it's much closer than you'd say modern Christianity is. The fall from the original state due to sin or lack of devotion to God, similar in a sense. Due to sin, original sin, normal Christian view. From the Gnostic view, it's more of the cosmic issue that happened that resulted in the demiurge and all that stuff. So similar, but not the same. Did Origen teach reincarnation? The short and honest answer is yes, he did. The fall in spiritual progression. He believed that souls descended into material bodies because of their distance from God, which is really theologically interesting when you walk down that unbelievably deep rabbit hole. Through spiritual growth and divine grace, they could return to their original state of unity with God. A lot of this also aligns with the idea of gnosis. Through gnosis, and that knowledge in most contexts is considered spiritual knowledge, not like smarty pants knowledge. So through spiritual growth, spiritual knowledge, and divine grace, God's good grace, they could return then to the original state. You could argue, I suppose, that modern Christianity teaches something similar, semantically different. Rules are different, but it's a similar thing. We were born here. I haven't heard any prominent Christian theologians really give an answer for, well, did our souls exist prior? I believe that the normal Christian view is your soul existed at the point of conception, meaning there was no pre-existence, like the Gnostics and Origen believed. But Christians believe that, we're born into sin, something that had nothing to do with us, but some guy did some girling guy did a thing a long time ago, and that ruined everything for everybody. They believe that God does have divine grace, and that through God's grace is why we're saved. But then on the other hand, it does have to do with your works, except for it doesn't have to do with your works. It's just grace. And then we go in this endless circle. But either way, in the normal Christian view, you can return to the original state as pure because they don't believe in pre-existence. Normal Christians believe that we return to our original state of purity, not of original existence or pre-existence. Now, whereas Gnostics believe you can return to the pre-existence, what was before, because you're here trapped. Whereas Christians believe, well, we were here, I guess depending on who you talk to, we are here just because, or we're here for some kind of purpose that Christians don't really seem to have an answer for. Multiple worlds, multiple chances. Origen speculated that God could create multiple worlds where souls continued their journey. And we have talked about this before. This sounds somewhat like reincarnation, but he never taught a clear cycle of rebirth into different human lives. Speculation that God could create multiple worlds, I know we've talked about, probably on a dozen different of these Tuesdays. Multiple worlds where souls continue their journey. I think maybe it was Ghost, and he can correct me, but I think maybe it was Ghost that at some point was talking about how you just keep bouncing from, excuse the semantics, but like from realm to realm. So when your soul is done here, you bounce to a different realm. and then everything is different, but everything is kind of the same. And it's this fractal kind of rebirth from realm to realm to realm. I think it was Ghost that had a similar
It was something like that.
Right? Okay. I remember.
But now I'm trying to remember.
I remember like the basics of it, because I believe something definitely similar to that, where once the soul is done here, I believe it has something that is kind of next level. So like Tampa was saying, in a sense that like gnosis or purpose continues to be repurposed to a higher format and is able to, I don't know, accomplish more or can handle more, like bandwidth increases or something to that effect.
Or if it's a video game, say it's like video, think of it as a video game and we're supposed to collect all the knowledge.
Yeah, so it's like experience points and then leveling up. Yeah. And then I like, for any of you who are like me and at one point in your younger years was a total loser, it's like World of Warcraft, where you can level up and then perhaps come back as a different character, and then an expansion pack comes out, and then you can leave the world you're on and go to a totally different one. But you go as a different level. So you can continue to increase. I kind of see it as something similar to that. Yeah, the video game example is good. I think that works.
Yeah, it helps my son understand it way better.
Yeah, I think that's a phenomenal way to go about it with kids for sure. Nat, I didn't even see you. Nat said, maybe a stupid question, but would you be able to provide a very basic definition of Gnostic for dummies? No, because that is not possible. But I don't think you were with us when we did this. So I will send this to you. Or I guess I'll put it... Now I'm going to put this in off topic, and I'm going to tag you over there. What are you in here as, Nat? Oh my god. It's in off topic. Girl, you're going to have to fetch it yourself. It's in there. No, the answer is no. I don't think there's any easy way to explain Gnosticism, and for the love of God, don't just Google it, because you will just get garbage information that is not true. If I am Gnostic, Tampa said, I'm definitely not a general one. I think that's probably fair to say. Yeah. Hermeticism, yes. Similar, for sure. Ghost said, if souls are just collection of ideological patterns or identities, I can see how they exist before being put into bodies. They will do this with AI too, give them different identity types. Yeah, that's a really interesting way to put that. Yeah. Huh.
Hey, friend.
You're the greatest.
For what? Oh my god!
You were the greatest.
No.
Now you're not. Run along. Run along. Try harder. You were going to be the greatest.
I'm gonna make you.
Now you're not.
Good,
shame.
You should shame me publicly.
No. Nat said, haha, Ghost, I felt like it was a can of worms, so I never asked, but I think I can't be ignorant for this conversation. No, Nat, you gotta watch the video we did. It's very detailed and it's very honest, which is more important than the detail. Layman said pre-existence is one of three views. The others are creationism, made at conception. There's no way I'm pronouncing this right. Traduskianism, I don't know. Made by the souls of each parent at conception. What is? Well, wait, those are the same thing. How are those different? I'm sorry, I know this is an older comment, but Layman, how these beetles are going to drive me absolutely crazy, girl. I have murdered so many of them. For half of a second, I was. The pre-existence is one of three views. The others are creationism, made at conception, or the word I can't pronounce, made by the soul of each parent at conception. How are those two different, though? Unless it's just very granular. But like the parents making the soul at conception, isn't that God making the child through the parents? And then conception by God, are we saying the parents don't make the child? What? Oh. If you could explain that more, Layman. To me, I see those as the same thing. What if each human brain is a world? This is something I thought about. But then you have to try to make sense of how the worlds interconnect. And I've struggled with that. But that as a concept is something I've definitely thought about. And I think in a sense, regardless,
the
it
worlds
is.
interconnect with speech.
Is it that simple, you think?
Well, I mean, it may be not that simple, but it's certainly a huge thing, right?
For sure. To some degree, for sure.
Symbols, speech, any five, like the five senses, that's how they connect, or maybe more senses that we can't perceive.
Okay, yeah, that's fair.
Because I've been thinking about the Democritus mini worlds theory for the past couple weeks, and it got me wondering, like, are the worlds like atoms, like any kind of brain or a soul? Like a human cell, is that a brain or is that a world? Like, there's tons of definitions for what a world is, but it's kind of a closed system,
right?
That interacts with other systems. So, not to get all in the weeds, but yeah.
No, that's interesting though. Yeah. Yeah, I think the human brain as a world, I think, is a very viable way to look at it. But God, does it just spark so many other questions and things you have to try to make sense of?
No doubt.
Mormons, Scientologists? What was that in reference to? I'm way behind, so I'm just going to skip forward. I'm afraid, Joe, that maybe reincarnated as Beetle. Bro, I hope to God I've been better than deserving of that. I have destroyed so many lives in this office over the past week. Here we go. So Layman said, okay, creationism says that the soul of a baby gets created from scratch by God. But that's just literally not true. And then Trajucianism, is that what that is? Trajucianism says God just made the first two souls and all the rest souls came from their souls. I get the words you're saying. I don't get how it makes sense. Because quite literally, babies are made how they're made, which is not by God from scratch. Like, I'm trying not to be graphic. Like, we know that's not how that works. So God doesn't poof a baby into existence in the womb, right? Like, when a mommy and daddy love each other very much, babies are created.
Where's the spark come from?
What's that?
Where's the spark come from?
Say more.
You can have that egg and you can have that sperm all the time, but you need to have that spark that puts those two together. There's a spark that happens the moment
Right,
of
and
conception.
that's why I think
Where's that
they're the same thing then. So it's, you know, God just made the first two souls and all the rest of the souls come from their souls. But
I was just thinking God doesn't poof a baby into you, because you can have, you know, you can do that thing all the time, but there's only certain times that you actually have those two connect, and it's because that spark gets added in there, and the spark's got to come. I'm just curious.
So what we would have to say then is that every child that's born is an intentional and, well, just is an intentional act of God. So, and what we'd have to say with that too, or what you'd at least have to talk about with that too, is that every baby that is not born and is like parents are trying to, we either then have to blame the devil like we do, or we have to say, well, God refused to light that spark. And then theologically, you have to deal with that question. And it doesn't mean it's right or wrong, but like that would be the totality of that conversation, in my opinion, which I have a hard time with. I don't know. But either way, like, go ahead.
I think you can just learn to accept it and get over yourself.
I'm with you.
Not you personally. I was just making a joke as the last guy. But like, humble yourself and just accept that that's how it is. It may not. And then I think once you accept that and you're able to move on from that, then you'll end up seeing actually that that's not what you really wanted, because that seems to be how things have worked out the entire time, every single time, 100%.
So is that what you believe then? So you believe, like, or do you believe that everything good that happens is God intentionally doing something? So like to be,
I don't think that we always understand what good actually is.
Well, say more.
I thought that I liked things and I wanted things and things should be a certain way until I started trying to go God's way. And once I started doing that, I started realizing that these things weren't bad. They were actually really good for me. I just couldn't see the big picture.
Sure.
I
So
think that
then
everything happens for a reason, and if we just accept that and keep going and don't get caught up on it,
okay.
we'll end up seeing how he turned that for good.
So you do believe that? You believe every single thing that happens for, you know, the good of God's will.
I think he can turn everything for the good.
But does he? Is the question. Does he?
Do we do what we're supposed to do in order for him to be able to?
But that changes it. That changes the theology then. So if humans are a part of this, then humans have some of that agency. So I'm with you. If humans choose to not do a thing, will God do it anyways? Will he overwrite as the admin of the system? If we have the opportunity to do something and say a kid is running in the street, going to get hit by a car, I'm standing right there. I have the ability and opportunity to save the kid. God wants the kid saved. If I choose with my free will not to, will God allow the kid to get hit, or will God interject as admin of the system and remove the kid from harm? That's that's what I'm asking. Where do you sit with that idea?
I don't know. I'd have to think about it more.
Okay.
I was just curious. My experience is like, if I'm faced with a situation where I like have to face a moral choice and do something, then, and there's no control, it was out of my control, I have to make that choice, then I will make the choice to, you know, do the thing that God would expect me to do. And I don't know, maybe the things end up working out for the people that are doing it correctly, maybe, or have changed to the right way. We can perceive it in a different way, possibly.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. These concepts are very hard. I have always been able to see both, and I just feel like both opposing views of it have pitfalls of their own. They're just different pitfalls. I think either way, though, people who choose to see, you know, everything is for the good of God's will, I think these are probably some of the happiest people. I think they're the people who find the most contentment and peace in life. And maybe even if some of it isn't quite true, I don't think it's a bad way to live. Like, I don't think it's a bad theology. I think it's a very good theology. I just, you know, during these conversations, I think the idea is to try to tear apart everything. But I think either view is tough. At a point, you hit certain aspects of it and you're like, damn, I don't know. I need to think about that more. Layman responded to me and said, does God, 1, intervene every time a baby is made, or 2, set up a world where souls split into babies, or 3, make eternal souls somewhere else that comes into the world for some reason? 3 would kind of be very loosely kind of a Gnostic-ish, very-ish view, but kind of. Between 1 and 2, so God either intervenes, so does a direct action every time a baby is made. So every time love making happens, and then even then though, you have to kind of decide, okay, well, even if God intervenes every time a baby is made, does that mean God intervenes in such a way that he makes the baby be made, or does he allow humanity to take course, the sperm meets the egg, and I guess in that process, if it was going to happen or if the potential was there, then God sparks the soul into it? Because you have, like, human birth is one thing, perhaps, and the soul actually filling the human is another thing. Then the other thing is, well, does every human have a soul? And this conversation is kind of keeps getting broken up into a million pieces and becomes very difficult to sort out. The other option being, does he set up a world where souls split into babies? So did God kind of like, did he set the video game, set the code, and then walk away? And what the code is programmed to do will be done. So if the soul was put in the first people, and the code is that the soul will reproduce with the people, then God is kind of hands off on autopilot, and humanity in the game is doing what humanity does. Not said the biology of how conception happens still does not explain the soul thing, though. I agree. And I think, like I said, I think the other question is, does every human being walking around have a soul? Or do the NPCs, do those people, do they have souls? Or are they non-player characters? I don't know.
Joe,
Yo.
I think the NPCs have a soul. In the same way, like a lamp can have a lampshade, but their lampshade is extremely opaque, like concrete. So
Okay.
like no light really gets through, but they're still light bearers technically.
Okay. Okay.
That's the way I envision it.
And I get, if you had to just like why in a sentence or two, why?
Why do I think that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, because everything has a spark in it, but there is the aspect of choice and things like that that can shade the lamp. So we're all light bearers, but we have different lampshades based on a lot of factors. It can be choice, it can be genetics, it can be, well, those are only the really two things that I can think of, circumstance, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So you think literally every human has a spark. Would you say that about animals too? Do you think animals have a soul? Or is it a
Yeah, because
different?
they're moving around. I think
Okay.
that's basically an arrangement of electricity. I think that's what a soul kind of is. There's a particular arrangement, and arrangements are identities, the particular shape.
Right. Okay. I mean, that makes sense to me. Thank you. You're such a doll. Okay. Oh, Ghost said I think it's a combo of 2 and 3, which was God set up a world where souls split into babies and makes eternal souls somewhere else that come into this world for some reason. That's interesting. A mixture of 2 and 3. I'd have to think about that one. On its face, I have a hard time with that. That's really interesting. I want to save this. Layman, it's been lovely to have you. A lot of very thoughtful stuff. That's interesting though. So yeah, man, that's something I really want to think about. The idea of God setting up a world where souls split into babies, combined with the idea where God makes eternal souls somewhere else that come into the world for some reason. That's a mind bender for me. I'm gonna spend some time on that. That's very interesting. Ghost said one body or soul with countless nesting doll souls all the way down. We can see this pattern when we watch cells divide to create living organisms, but this happens cosmically too. That's a great example, yeah. Huh. Ghost said the one soul would be the Barbello concept, yeah. And humans are way down the chain, but we still follow that pattern. Yeah, I guess so. Huh? Nat said, makes me think of a friend who had a baby who passed away at 3 months. God, that is a terrifying thing to think about. I have a hard time understanding what God's purpose was. I can't understand why take her life and put the family through that. Right. This is why I struggle with the idea of predestination. That's why I struggle with the idea of God curating the world. I think if we believe those things, for me, if I believe those things, God is evil. And I don't find any way around that at all. And so in that sense, perhaps I'm Gnostic, where if that is true, then whatever made this world was not a good thing. It was an evil thing, because this world is all about pain. It's not all about, but it's heavily about pain. It's heavily about suffering. Ever since the beginning of time, there has been pain and suffering, and it's been a massive part, even in the Christian stories, even the Jewish stories, I guess, the Hebrew stories. But from the very beginning of the Hebrew Bible, like, it's pain and suffering, just lots of it. And we just get blamed for it. Humans did thing. Adam and Eve did thing. Well, welcome to your world of suffering. I'm with you, Nat, I guess, is my point. And I have a very hard time with the theology that God is both good and also curates what happens in the world, and therefore is also pretty terrible guy, if that's the case, in my opinion. But I'm a heretic.
Okay, now here I go with my craziness. Here I come.
Okay.
Okay, so in the game, when things like that happen, it's the choice you have to make. Are you going to get stuck on it? You're going to get stuck in the trap? And, or are you going to overcome it and advance in the game?
Yeah, sure.
Like I look at it as a test. Like, yes, it's sad, it's awful, it's horrible. We don't know why, and we may not ever understand why. But how do we get through it?
Totally fair. But it's still kind of a Calvinist view, because like you could imagine an all-powerful God who could have set up the game however he wanted. Unless he's beholden to something greater than him, this could have been however he wanted. And for whatever reason, pain has to be a part of the game. You could say it didn't have to be a part of the game. God chose for it to be a part of the game. Otherwise, it's kind of the other theory of, well, maybe the evil, Satan, darkness, whatever, is a bit more powerful than Christians have been led to believe. And perhaps there actually is a power struggle going on. And perhaps pain and suffering aren't necessarily from God. Perhaps there's something that people have to go through because this world seems to be run by something evil that is not God. The problem is that those two things can't be true. We can't say we have a God that is all good and all powerful, who curates everything. Everything is for the good of God's glory. Everything is for the good of the people, whatever, even if we don't understand it. And at the same time say that Satan is doing those things also. It's just like, it's not cohesive. It's hard to bend out flat and be like, okay, well, this makes sense to me.
That's what puts me back on the mind thing. Like it's the choices we make. Which way are we going to go? Are we going to go God's way or the other way? Because it sounded crazy to me at first when I heard Ghost say that he doesn't think that Satan is like an entity, like he's a being.
Yeah.
He's part of us. I think it's the devil and the angel on your shoulder. The good and the bad.
Yeah.
Fighting. It's within us. It's a mind thing. Without God, that's where we end up. What we consider Satan. And then with God, it all goes for the good.
For sure.
I think
it's one of those things that once you actually sit and think about it for just a few minutes, the idea that Satan is something that is internal to humanity is not like a far-fetched thing. I think it's much easier to make even the canonical scriptures, but definitely outside of them, to make them cohesive in regards to that concept. It's much easier to do that than it is to make the scriptures and extra canonical texts cohesive with the idea that there's this scary, dark, external deity that is stalking prey and stuff. It makes a lot more sense contextually across a broad range of scriptures. The idea that like Satans are like this internal struggle that is consistent and you're battling yourself. You cut out, what'd you say?
It's our carnal mind that we're supposed to overcome.
Right. I think it makes a lot of sense when you spend some time on it. Nat said, like, obviously I want to say that baby had a soul, the baby that died at 3 months. But did God create it just for that reason? All that work for a baby who never became sentient? Situations like these add complexity to this. Yeah, I mean, for sure. And it's the whole idea of, is God the type of God to let you have a baby, go through all of that? Like, I couldn't imagine. The cat's due soon. Like, time is flying. She's due in a couple months. I could not imagine then 3 months into having that baby, it dying. There would be 0% of me that would be like, God is good. And also in that same sentence, God has killed my baby. Like it's a part of God's plan. Like either God isn't that powerful if this had to be a part of his plan, or God is kind of terrible. That's kind of terrible. And then it leaves you with the kind of the Calvinist view of, well, we just don't understand Calvinists and others too, but it's popular in the Calvinists that you don't need to understand it for it to be true, which I don't necessarily disagree with. But if we were given this conscious mind and we were given the ability to think and process what we are, which is where, we have a threshold, there's a limit. And God, in all of his good, gentle, loving grace and goodness, allows that. I don't know how that becomes something that is cohesive with the God that is described. I don't know how to make all of that work together, both theologically and scripturally. That's where I personally hit a wall, for sure. So Nat, I am with you, and I think it's very hard to make that make sense. She said, I'm sorry, but as someone with a 2-month-old, I don't know if I can get behind that one. I don't think I need God to put me through that to teach me a lesson. I become more bitter if I'm being honest. And I think a lot of people do. I think a lot of people have left Christianity because they were told more predestination type things where, you know, I'm sorry you don't understand it, but your child needed to die for something for God's good. And I think a part of that is just unintelligent and uneducated pastors telling people things. But I think a part of it too is even if you take it to a pretty deep level, it's hard to make it all work. You can make pieces of it work, but to make the total concept of who God is and what he is character-wise, to make that cohesive with what he gave us mentally and spiritually to be able to process and what our reality is, and then also say God does these terrible things, but they're not terrible because of this, but it's something that we can't process or understand or conceptualize. No matter how you string it out, eventually God becomes someone who's kind of not that good, not that nice. At the very least, you'd have to say like, well, he's not that nice because he gave us the conception we have, and he chooses to do things that are something like that, probably the most painful thing you'll ever deal with in this life, but no ability to grasp like, okay, it was for my good. It is I understand what this was for. You're just kind of left to suffer. I have a hard time with that, God.
If your player that was a task that you had to complete before you could move on.
Your baby being killed?
Learning how to grieve in that. I think that people are looking outside too much and we're not looking inside. I don't think it's so much, like I said, I do it as a video game. I don't pay attention to what's going on around me. I pay attention to how I'm dealing with whatever's going on around me.
Sure. Yeah, and I think that's the biggest thing. Like I'm huge on like emotional intelligence. So you will never get me to argue that ever. I think we in every possible way control how we feel and how we process information and how we conceptualize things to a point, to our understanding. But I don't sit in the camp of, well, it's good that your baby was killed because you learned this lesson.
I like that stuff where it's not hard. If that's part of it and that's something that we need to get past it, then I don't know.
No, I mean, I hear you. Yeah, I hear you. I can't personally see it that way.
It ended up being the best thing that could have happened to him. But at the time,
it could be. It could be.
I thought it was the end.
Right, for sure. And I'm sure that happens for some people, but I think it would be kind of crazy to say that happens for everybody. So I think a lot of people just kind of suffer their entire lives. But then I think by kind of your ideology, by mine too, we'd kind of blame them. Well, you didn't gain control. You let life happen to you. You didn't choose how to process and interact with the things that are happening to you. But it's kind of a different conversation. Like our ability to process and cope and deal with life is like, that's one thing. But the conversation of, okay, well, theologically, who is God character-wise? What kind of entity is this? How do they engage with the world? What is their actual involvement? It's kind of they're kind of two different conversations. I think God can be totally and absolutely good, and humans can still be entirely reliant on themselves for emotional intelligence and dealing with things and coping. And then we can blame everything on Satan's, which at the end of the day is us for the most part. Or we can say, well, God is maybe not good and humans are still responsible for how we deal with and cope with and function and conceptualize things. But that we're just not blaming the devil, we're blaming God. But I kind of see them as two different conversations. Because I guess we can be coping with life because of Satan's, or we can be coping with life because of God. And I have a hard time with saying we have to learn to cope or deal with horrible things because God is doing them. It seems easier to look at it and to conceptualize it through the lens of people or Satan's, because that seems like a given.
Or is blame in itself the trick?
Sure, which is a whole nother conversation. Yeah. That's definitely something.
We're pointing to blame outside when we have no control over that.
Right. I think either way, it all boils down. I'm with you psychologically 100%. I think nothing could happen to somebody that they couldn't learn to grow from. I think everything that happens, you have the opportunity and ability to make it a positive thing, even if it is inherently a terrible thing. I think even a child dying is something you could learn to, at the very least, cope with. But I think in some situations, perhaps it does set you on a new path, or you meet someone and you're like, I'm all for that stuff. I'm a big believer in it. It's solely the theological implications that I personally struggle with. But regardless of that, everybody's responsible for learning how to cope and deal with life. Big proponent of that. I'm trying to see if there was anything super important or crazy before I head out of here, because my head still feels like it's going to explode. Can do NZ said, have you considered that the soul in the baby changed its choice to live out that incarnation? I don't think you're still here because I don't see anything else. If you are, can you say more? I'm not quite sure what you mean. Ghost said being... Oh, this channel's ruined anyways. Being killed requires intention. I don't think God wants babies to die. I think that's for the most part where I sit as well. To me, it doesn't make sense for God to promote humanity and be fruitful and have babies, but also like, I'm going to kill some of them. And you're just not going to know why. I don't think I'll ever be able to make that make sense. I can see the whole concept of fallen world and evil and even demiurge and monad and all of that, because it's the implication of evil is there, and the implication of evil is strong. And this whole, in my opinion, kind of newer Christian idea where, well, Satan's already defeated. Like, I don't know where the hell you're getting any of that from. It's certainly not the Bible. It's certainly not the Apocrypha. It's certainly not any ancient biblical text, canonical or non. I don't know where people get that from. It seems like the adversary, the Satan's evil, seems to be a true adversary to both God and humanity.
Jesus came and showed us how to beat Satan.
How's that?
That's who defeated him.
Well, how is Satan interacting with the world right now if he's been defeated?
No, that's for us that's our responsibility to overcome it, I think.
You mean the overcoming of the personal demon type thing?
Right.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, fair. And I think even that feeds into the Gnosis thing and the Gnostic thing. It's only, so if that's your only perspective or perception of Satan, is that it's only this internal struggle, then 100%. Yeah, Jesus definitely gave that. I think for anybody who believes it's external. Go ahead.
I saw him as a being last week, but Ghost had mentioned something about it, and I was like, oh, that's weird. And then I started thinking about it, and I was like, oh, wait, oh, goodness, that fits.
Yeah.
So
it totally fits.
So I'm looking at it from this way now, and yeah, it fits with a lot of the other stuff I've been thinking about.
So then a challenge for you, I guess, think about it from both. Because I guess this will be fun, because I sit on the fence of Ghost's interpretation. I believe it's true, but I don't believe it's the only thing that's true. I think there seems to be, both scripturally, Christianity and not, there seems to be a lot of indication through history that there are also external Satans, whether these are non-human beings or whatever, but they're things that are not just our own internal struggle. And it perhaps they engage. It's like our internal Satans in some way interact with the external Satans. And this is maybe what you see with like sleep paralysis, or when people talk about being having demons exercise, which the Bible certainly talks about, and there's no way to get away from it. I think it's hard for me to make sense of a internal Satan only and not say, okay, well, there's also something external. It's just not this one devil.
It's kind of what we become when we go away from God.
100%, yeah. But the idea that there are also Satans outside of the human form.
Oh, like the demons?
Things like that, yeah.
I don't see those. I see those as I thought that was like the souls of the Nephilim.
I think demons are internal. and then we embody them and then do things in the outside world. So you're right, Joe, that it's inside and outside. Nothing can just be one side of the coin. There always has to be a counterpart.
No, but you think they're all in relation to a human body, don't you?
I think they're all in relation to a body. Human is a, whatever term,
Okay.
but
Okay.
a body, whether it's alien, whether it's whatever is out there, who knows? But they have to have a body to kind of operate in.
And see, that makes sense to me, but this is one thing you and I have a hard time, well, I have a hard time with, is that I'm not convinced that the rules apply to things that are not of our normal reality. I'm not sure that something, for simplicity's sake, something of another world, if it were to come here in some fashion, I'm not convinced it has to play by these rules. I'm not convinced it has to have a vessel or a vehicle to move around in. And I know from other conversations you do. And it makes perfect sense. And a part of me wants to.
So how would it influence us?
Well, that's the whole thing. Go ahead.
I'm gonna send you a link to a video, Ghost, and you can check it out and tell me what you think.
Sweet.
About how the demons could access us physically.
Oh, that'll be interesting.
Yeah, without a terminal, like without some type of access point, I don't understand how they could influence us. Say they are outside of us, which I do think they are, inside and outside. But like influencing us would require something to interface with us.
Right.
No, but why? So let's say, like, to me, that's just it's very like human conception. Like, if I can't conceptualize it, it is not true. I have a hard time with that. I don't struggle with the idea of something completely otherworldly not having a physical form, and for the sake of visualizing it, a plume of dust that floats into your ear hole and into your brain, and thus has some interaction with you. I just don't know why it would have to play by like the rules of our conception. That's what I struggle with. Like, why is that? These are our
because
rules.
we're little miniature consciousness. Like the fact that we're here and even talking suggests that there is a consciousness above us. And the fact that we're here and that we all acknowledge that God made us. Why did God make us? Why are there these bodies and brains and systems that can be entered? But
I don't think
God. Are you saying like?
I don't think God made demons. So say, and I also don't believe God is the only. I don't believe God is like not struggling. I don't think he's sitting on a throne of easy life with tea being, fanned by beautiful ladies. I think there's this wild struggle to some degree happening that is completely, like the Gnostics say, another thing I'm in alignment with them, completely out of our conception. That it is silly to even try to conceptualize it, because we're putting God in this really narrow, like ridiculous box. So if God creates humanity in this reality, I'm 100% on board with the idea that everything in this reality has to play by the rules of this reality. I'm not convinced that God would have to play by the rules of this reality. If God so chose to engage directly in this reality, again, no part of me thinks that he'd have to play by the rules of science, or that it would have to be explainable by us, or something that we could conceptualize. I think he could do things in ways that we would never be able to make sense of. And so I guess in a similar way, I believe that about that which is evil as well. Because I just don't know why they'd have to. Like, if these things are so great, if you believe the Christian story of a Satan completely, I guess depending on your view of that, whether that's external or internal, if we were influenced by something outside of us, why would it have to play by the rules of what is happening here? But that's going to pigeonhole us into the same issue.
They wouldn't be able to influence us if they weren't playing by rules. Because now that doesn't mean we understand exactly what they're doing at all times, but in order to influence a system, you have to be compatible with that system in a certain way.
So say from your view, say there is a demon from obviously somewhere else, and then it somehow, some way makes it to this reality, but you cannot see it, you cannot touch it. Like it defies all of these rules of this reality, but it has the ability to speak, or it has the ability to hook up to a human's brain somehow. USB-C is able to do that. You don't believe any of that's possible. You think no matter what, whatever this thing that is living is, would have to play by the rule set of this reality.
On some level, yes, because we wouldn't be able to even be having a conversation about them otherwise.
No, but that's us playing by the rules, right? I don't think
So, like,
we
what
can
rules?
explain. I don't think we can explain demon stuff. That's why I think there's really no cohesive nature to it, how it's been described throughout history. It's kind of been all over the place. And a lot of the time, I think that's why it's described as very silly, because it's human. It's like the Genesis story to me. I think it's very silly. It's trying to describe something that is extremely difficult to conceptualize for humans. And so they make this story of, well, God did this and then God did that and things like that. I think the things that are greater and outside of our conception that have had influence, I don't think they have to play. But I think they have to play by some rule in order to engage with us. Like, I get that. That makes sense to me. But I don't believe they have to play by all the rules, or even a lot of them. I think they could choose to just play by one rule and therefore interact with the humanity here. So even if they could just play by means of vocalizing something, but they don't exist otherwise. They're a plume of dust. They're fog billowing through the wind, but they have the ability to vocalize something or to interject words into the mind of a human. I just don't know why that couldn't be, I guess. I've never really understood that. I get the answers, and the answers make sense, but they're not convincing to me, I guess.
Yeah, I guess we'll have to pick up again on that sometime, like maybe what are demons or something, because I see it as very cartoony the way people think of demons. I
For
think
sure.
of demons in a more psychological and like quantum way, and not, evil creatures or whatever.
Yeah, and I
plumes of
agree.
dust.
I definitely agree. I wonder if that's all, I guess, is my thing. I just wonder if that's the start and the end, or if it's just a part. It's a difficult topic.
Yeah, it is. It is. Whatever it is, it's a pattern. So
That I
patterns
agree
can
with.
be super small. Like size doesn't even really matter. It's just the shape of the pattern. So you could go down to the quantum level, and then that pattern could influence the one above it, and above it, and above it, until it reaches our consciousness, and then we can have an idea or thought that is destructive, and that could be considered a demonic thought. But it started, way down below or way up above, and we're just part of that pattern in a system that cycles eternally, I think. So I don't know.
That's interesting. Yeah, actually, I've never thought about it exactly like that.
Just because we can't perceive. Oh, yeah. Let Layman talk.
No, go ahead, because I'm gonna have to shut down here real soon. So, Layman, since you came on, what's going on?
Hey, what's up, y'all?
What's up, man?
Good, dude. No, I was just thinking. Oh yeah, about the following the rules. So following the rules of this world, it could be just God being consistent with himself. So like if God committed to one certain idea, he just has to follow through.
Sure, yeah, and I think I agree with that. Like on, if we're playing like dark team versus light team, so that which is good and that which is evil. If God created this earth and God is good, then I can totally see why everything on this earth that is good would have to play by these rules. I guess the whole thing kind of infinitely regresses to this idea of, before any of this, God and Satan were in heaven, and Satan turned away from God and turned his back on him and wanted to be as great as him, and then fell from heaven. And there's theological implications to that, and one of them was Satan was able to do something that it seems that you shouldn't have been able to do. Like, it seems like that would have broken a rule within that context, but Satan was able to do it. And then God decides, for whatever reason, to make this world shortly after that, it seems, and put people here and set rules in place And Satan in the story of Genesis broke the rules already right there. If you take it literal, which I don't, but it's a good example. Satan assumed the form of a serpent, and again, I don't take it literal, and I know most of us here don't. But if you were to, he already broke the rules. So even if we don't take that literal, it kind of indicates that rules could be broken to me, even if it's not literal. Go ahead.
I'm kind of wondering if it's like a more basic rule. So in that case, it's like the rule is more about like a value that God would have. Okay. So the value in that case would be like fairness, and then from the fairness would come like freedom for each individual. So if God already instituted like fairness for each person to make their own choices, or each soul or each being, then that's where the inviolability of each person would come from.
Okay.
Maybe.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. So I guess, what do you think about the whole Satan thing? Because that really is kind of the crux before you can even talk about the rest of it. So the normal Christian view of Satan is obviously there is some entity that's specific. And then you could argue some Christians believe there are smaller Satans, or whatever you want to call them. The idea that there is a Satan, and then there are kind of like demons and things like that, and they're able to interact with people and mess things up. Do you believe in that, or do you believe in a different concept of Satan?
Kind of weird, because like it's a word. Like Satan is just a word, but there could also be an individual that the word comes from, right? So it's like, I can't really think of an example, but like, yeah, like all ideas have an origin. It's like an analogy. Okay, so analogies, there's like, happy as a clam or whatever. The analogy, it's like, because clams always look like they're smiling, I guess. Yeah, it refers to the actual clam and the smiling shape of a clam. And then that's the happiness type that the other person would be referring to, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. It makes sense. I wonder if this is something we do just need to go into deeper, because there's a lot of prerequisites before you even get to the thing Ghost and I were kind of going back and forth about. It's like dissecting the biblical account of Satan, or Lucifer, the adversary of God. So was that story literal or not to begin with? How did evil actually enter the world? Like, if God created this and this was all good, why is evil a part of the rules? And I know Ghost has a specific answer on that, but this feeds into a lot of stuff.
I'm thinking of it because I kind of dabble a lot with idealism. I think idealism is like probably what the world is, like what reality is. And I think that evil could just be, okay, if reality boils down to an omniscient being, like at the very bottom layer, we have an omniscient mind. That mind should also have knowledge of evil. I don't think you can get wisdom without knowledge of evil, because wisdom kind of avoids evil, like volitionally.
Right.
So evil would exist in an omniscient mind, but it wouldn't be accessed by that omniscient mind. If there were like a bunch of other minds within that mind, maybe those can tap into what evil is and they could bring evil into the world. But the omniscient mind, like the fundamental base layer that has to be perfect in order for everything else to exist, it has to be like consistent, then that one doesn't have to ever tap into evil. But the faulty beings like us probably would.
That's interesting. Yeah. Yeah, we gotta do this. We need to. So next week we're doing something else, but maybe the following week it'd be good to get at least the three of us and try to just destroy this topic. Because you guys have similar views, but it seems like there's at least some differences for sure. And I am probably the outsider on this, and I'll just try to poke holes in everything.
Who knows? Dude, I know it was
it's
kind of late
interesting.
too. You were talking about closing, but I do have that biblical case. I shared some stuff in the tab that said if you have stuff to talk about. I was kind of late with it, but
Ooh,
about
okay. Let me see
yeah,
real quick.
it's late. It's definitely late, but there's like a kind of a fivefold approach to reincarnation.
Okay. Yeah, I got it. So it should be up on the screen for anybody who's looking. So philosophical, soteriological, theological, biblical. Okay. Let's see.
Yeah, the scientific one. So I listen to a dude on YouTube a lot called Theology Unleashed.
Okay.
He's actually a Hare Krishna follower. Yeah, and it's really cool. Like he had Jimmy Akin on there a while ago, and they were talking about the Catholic position on reincarnation. I'm not Catholic or anything, but I do have like a big respect for Catholicism. But yeah, dude, they had really, really cool conversation that basically sounded like reincarnation isn't even off the table for Christianity. Like it's a possibility. And then Michael Jones from Aspiring Philosophy is another guy who had some discussions with Arjuna from Theology Unleashed. And they sounded like, of course, there's disagreement from the Christian side. They don't think reincarnation is possible or consistent with Christianity.
Right.
But which that's where the heresy part comes in, where it's like if it's inconsistent with core Christian tenets, then it's a heresy.
Right.
But if it can be reconciled with core Christian tenets, then it wouldn't be heresy. It would be more like heterodox, which just means like other belief for the orthodox part, because orthodox is like mainstream basically.
Right.
But then so he had another discussion with him too, and most of my cases come from them, their discussion. Yeah, dude, the biblical one. I know it's already getting late. We're already going off too much, but yeah, man. Maybe we can go through the biblical a little bit if y'all want to. Let's see if
if you can brush through it pretty quick. Otherwise, next Tuesday we're doing a related one. So if you want to go in depth on it, I'm down to just let you roll. But it'd have to be next week. I got to go to bed. But if you can run through it quick, I'm down to do it now. So you tell me.
If you did want to go through next week, it would be the soteriological case, because that one is pretty much all about purgatory and what purgatory is.
I'm down for we can do both next week if they can be quick, or if you really wanted to do the Bible tonight, we just gotta be fast with it.
Cool. Okay, Bible real quick.
Yeah.
Bible real quick. So I'm thinking like Malachi 4:5, where it kind of Malachi prophesies that behold, before the great and terrible day of the Lord. Which is like basically, if I understand it correctly, it's about like the prediction of the Messiah coming and like restoring all things. Before that day comes, it has to be Elijah who has to appear, and there's no indication that it's like Elijah, because I know what's that? Got Questions?
Yeah.
That Got Questions website. They'll try to say it was like Elijah, and then they use the words from Luke chapter 1, where it says in the spirit and the power of Elijah. They try to say that is like somebody like Elijah, but that like vocabulary isn't used anywhere else. So that leads to the second point, where like Luke's testimony of John's nativity, it says in the spirit and the power of Elijah, but if you connect that with the prophecy, it seems like it has to be Elijah.
Yes.
And if you connect that with Jesus's eulogy and the right after the transfiguration, you have Elijah and Moses appearing with Jesus on the mount. And then you have the disciples asking, hey, wasn't Elijah supposed to come before the Son of Man? And then Jesus says, yeah, Elijah did come and the people were like super abusive to him. They did whatever they wanted with him. And that's when the disciples recognized that he was talking about John the Baptist.
Yeah.
So it seems like there's this weird connection with Elijah and John the Baptist there.
Yep.
Then, I'm sure that's all been heard before too. But then, like, it goes on. Let me see. The weird connection with John the Baptist and Elijah in 1 Kings 18, which that might be on the screen right now. I'm on the Discord, so I can't see. But 1 Kings 18, you have Elijah on Mount Carmel, and he, that's the whole epic scene with you have the prophets of Baal and Elijah calling down fire. And then the prophets of Baal get slaughtered by Elijah. So Elijah has them all slaughtered. And you have King Ahab and Jezebel, who is basically like trying to kill Elijah at some point, but they fail, and Jezebel dies. Then you have in Matthew 14, later on, you have John the Baptist, who gets slaughtered by a King Ahab type of person and a Jezebel type of queen. So there's Herodias, who orders the beheading of John the Baptist, which that kind of matches the picture of karma that we would expect for Elijah, especially if the slaughtering of Baal's prophets is not justified.
Yep.
So he gets what he deserved at the end, but that confirms who he is, and he has to be Elijah in order for Jesus to be the Messiah, if I'm understanding all of that correctly. So there's that. And then you have in John chapter 1, John denies that he's Elijah, but then in Matthew 11, John doubts that Jesus is the Messiah.
Yeah.
And then in Matthew 11, Jesus affirms that John was Elijah. And then you have the one that actually Tampa brought up in that same chat a little while ago. That was the Matthew 16 one, where Jesus is asking, who do the people say that I am? And like, without even batting an eye, they're just like, oh, you're Elijah or Jeremiah or one of the prophets. Like, it's just a normal thing that prophets come back. That's weird.
Mm-hmm.
And then Jesus doesn't correct them, which, like, we have other examples in the Bible where the disciples were incorrect about something and Jesus corrects them.
Yep.
But that's not one of the cases. So that's interesting silence on that point. And then there's also the specific verse from Job that I know y'all are doing a study on Job, but and y'all probably just read this too, so it might be fresh in your memory. But Job 33
19, right?
33, yeah, 19 to 30. Yes, sir. That one. That section is interesting because it concludes in 30 with saying that God does all these things twice, 3 times with a man to bring his soul back from the pit.
Yep.
That he may be lighted with the light of life. So it's like, I know that can be interpreted as like being on the verge of the pit, like you're about to die, but then God brings you back each time. But that verse, it says from the pit, so it's seems to be an Old Testament thingy there.
So the John the Baptist thing is extremely compelling, and
It's a weird one.
It's really weird, and the tie-in with Elijah, all of that is why when I start, I don't think you were here yet, but that's the next thing I'm personally going into, because not specifically reincarnation, but some other aspects of it that are odd and kind of open up doorways. But the reincarnation thing is evident in a sense, and I think it's really hard to get away from it. You have to do gymnastics to completely shun And you did a great collection here. If you were to try to completely shun all of that evidence, you have to be dishonest or deluded. And I don't think there's any in between. If you want to reject a part of the concept, or you want to reject the specific way that the concept was taught from the East, then fine. But to reject the fact that this is all in the Bible that we've decided is canon, and then if you extrapolate it beyond the canon, this just gets worse. In terms of people who want to reject it, it just gets worse. Because there's so much more about the concept of rebirth and pre-birth and re-existence and reincarnation. Like these are extremely common things. They always were.
Yep.
Yeah, this was great, dude. This was really well put together.
What's up? Oh yeah. Okay, wait, one more, because this one's actually really fun.
Okay.
There was an objection to Jesus, or to John the Baptist being Elijah, because some, and I think this was from Got Questions. They'll say that Elijah didn't actually die, so it can't be Elijah's spirit on John the Baptist.
Yes.
Because he was taking a chariot of fire, right?
Yep.
But 2 Kings 2 is really weird, because that's where we get the story that Elijah was taken up in the chariot of fire. And then it goes like right after Elijah is taken up into the chariot of fire, after Elisha asked for the double portion of the Spirit. And this is just kind of like a big question that I have. But he gets taken up in the chariot of fire, and Elisha sees it, and then it says that when he goes back into the city, like all the prophets were saying, hey, God's going to take away your master today. And Elisha's like, don't tell me about it. I don't want to hear it. And then he goes back into the city, though, after he sees Elijah go up, which is the requirement for him to get the double portion. And then the prophets of that city are like, whoa, the spirit of Elijah is on Elisha. So the spirit of Elijah seems to be like on Elisha, and that's kind of weird to say. But in that same chapter at the end, that's where the two bears come out of the forest and kill the 42 kids. And it's weird that there's like two bears.
Yeah.
Instead of just like one. It could have just been one. But he asked for a double portion. And then the prophets say that the spirit of Elijah is on Elisha. So it's like there's two people in Elisha from that point forward.
Yeah, that's one I honestly haven't really looked into. The rest, yeah, the rest you come across when you do the deep dive into reincarnation. That's one I don't think I've ever really looked at. That is interesting.
Yeah, and then you have the chariots of fire, or when Elijah gets taken up, Elisha says, my father, and the Israel and his chariots. I think that's what he says. My father, Israel and his chariots. It's in 2 Kings 2, and then I think it's also in, oh yeah, that's the verse right there, 2 Kings 2:12, and 2 Kings 13:14. Elisha's student says the same thing when Elisha's about to die. So, and then you have what the prophet's role was in the military, is the prophet was going to be the one who predicts the successes, which strategies are going to be successful, which ones are going to fail. Like, they're the ones who have the foresight. They're like, if you do this, that'll work. If you do this, that's going to fail. You ought to do this. Like, right. That seems to be the prophet's role in the military at the time. So when the students see the prophets die, it's like they're lamenting their own security as a nation. That's what it seems like that line means. My father, Israel and his chariots.
Yeah. You can definitely see it. Interesting. Huh. Yeah, there's a few those last two are ones that I'm interested. It's something I've never given any time to. That's really interesting. And the rest was just a great mashup of all of it. And very specific to canon. So very good. Then align that with the rest, align it with what basically all of Christianity that we're aware of, even the ones that normal Christianity hated, align it all, and you basically have the entirety of Christian history that adhered to some version of reincarnation. Meaning the minority of people did not believe in some form of reincarnation. And now it's flipped, and it's an odd world. But it's just completely flipped. That was great, dude. That was really well put together. You said the other portion of it you'll run through with us next Tuesday?
Maybe. I'm gonna have to really work on it more, but the soteriological part, yeah, if you're gonna do purgatory.
Yeah, it'd be great. Even just a chunk. I mean, don't kill yourself, but some notes, whatever. I'm sure you can go off the cuff on some of it, but yeah, it'd be great to get your take on some of that stuff.
Dude, more than anything, I need objections because not a lot of people are willing to engage with this. So.
I got you. If you whatever you put together, put it in the notes like you did last time, and try to do it a little bit sooner. And I will get objections put together.
Nice.
I will do answers. So yeah, I'll open up. And with that, I gotta go. This is 2 hours, y'all, and I am an old ass man and need to go to sleep. So we'll do purgatory next Tuesday, and then everything else is normal. I don't know what I was waiting to think of. This is why I need to go to bed. So next Tuesday will be purgatory. There will be no poll. Thursday, we're in the Book of Giants, and then Saturday is the Gospel of Thomas. I highly recommend you either read it with us or read it on your own, because after we read stuff, I'm just going to start referencing it like it's normal. So if you happen to not be here or whatever, if we've read it, I feel like I have license to now start talking about it. So, and Thomas will definitely be one of them. So either read it yourself. It's 114 verses, because technically it's 114 sayings of Jesus. It's obviously not a part of the canon. It's highly controversial. It is insanely interesting, and it will connect like some of the dots of all of the recent conversations about Gnostic belief, Gnostic thought, Gnostic theology, and then early Christianity and all that stuff. It connects a lot of dots. It's very, very interesting to look at. So we're going to start that this Saturday at 7 p.m. Central Time. Thursday is the Book of Giants at 6 p.m. Central Time. And then Sunday should be back to normal for the Book of Job at 6 p.m. Central Time. And we are rivaling Joe Rogan runtimes tonight. Well, this was a great conversation. This was really good. And Layman was a great finale. That was a lovely way to wrap things up. What a great way to wrap it up. That was thrilling. It was very good stuff. But I'm out. I love y'all very much. Have a wonderful night, and hopefully see you Thursday for Enoch and the Book of Giants. If we're being honest, please do all the YouTube stuff. Help us get more smart people like Layman. That would be fantastic. Love y'all. Have a good night.